Welcome to Watch Your Point Overtime, where we, I like to use the term, let our hair down. Those of you have it, kind of figurative, and talk about issues of national, state, and local importance, a little more in depth, a little more freewheeling. Chris, we were talking about CenterPoint's attempt to regain public trust, and I think they had to do something. What are your thoughts there?
So, for me, they came out with this. I don't know what these little boxes are they're putting on now. The new way that they can faster way to recharge the lines.
Switches or something like that.
Those things I found out have been publicly available to CenterPoint for over 10 years, and now they're coming out. They're installing them in Houston. So that does nothing for me. We've suffered through how many times we've suffered through outages when they could have been installing those things for over 10 years. They're just too little too late in my view.
I have seen a fleet of tree maintenance firms out in the communities in various neighborhoods, and I believe they've taken some considerable action. But the question becomes, why wasn't it done before, Bill?
Yeah, I mean any of this stuff that they could have done any of this stuff before, and they chose not to. And there's a conflict of interest between having an investor-owned utility and serving the public. I mean, they make money by cutting their expenses, and the community makes is more reliable by them increasing expenses. So it's a natural conflict of interest, which is supposed to be resolved through the regulatory process, because you have to have a monopoly when it comes to lines. But I will say this. We have a particularly difficult problem here in Houston, which is we have mostly overhead lines. We built things on the cheap in this city for years, and we have a lot of overhead lines. We didn't bury the lines, and we have just an enormous number of trees. And I don't think this idea that we can go back and cut back trees and solve this problem is really right. I would just encourage anybody to drive around Houston and just look up at the utility lines, and you'll see that they run through trees all over this community. If you were going to eliminate all the trees, you would literally be cutting down several 100,000 trees, and nobody's going to put up with that in Houston. So I think the reality is we're going to have to get serious about burying lines, and that's going to be expensive and disruptive and all that, and I understand all the problems with it. But it's done other places. In the woodlands, everything is buried. You don't see any lines out there. And I think we've got to start it. We can't do it all at once. We need to at least start getting those lines out of the air and underground.
I agree with that.
All right, Charles, jump in here.
I don't know, as Bill was talking, he was saying that everything in this town is built cheap. In my head, I'm thinking everything in this town feels like it's either built cheap or built on a scam. I don't know, it's one but I love it nonetheless. But yeah, I mean, something different has to be done. And I fault CenterPoint because they cut corners all these years, and I've also been seeing a lot of trucks cutting trees lately too. But they've cut corners all these years. But ultimately, the legislature is who we have relied on unsuccessfully to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
And now, and it's funny because we hear all these hearings and everybody's kind of rallying and they're yelling at CenterPoint and putting out these statements. Well, where was this anger before? Where was this oversight before in previous legislative sessions? We knew that it has not happened to this extent, of course, but we knew that they were tasked with oversight. So where was that level of oversight before? Glad it's here now, but it should have been there. And it also leads me to wonder that when it comes to CenterPoint, they were supposed to be overseeing and they didn't, and now we're here. What other areas are we going to end up finding out in the next storm that turns out to be the same case? And so it's just frustrating. But I do feel that CenterPoint has had so much bad press that they're going to do better now. I really do. I feel like after as much as they've gotten beat up these past 60 days, I think it's going to be better next time.
How long will it last?
Well,
I'm going to throw something out to the lawyers, future, current, and whenever it suits you.
Past.
There may not be an actual. People died.
Yes.
People died. Now, if there's an actionable tort, is that what it's called, Chris?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, people died because of hypothetically lack of preparation. Is there anything? Sometimes that's what causes people to move.
No, as a public utility, CenterPoint's immune from a tort action on that, and so there's no lawsuit there that would lie there. unfortunately.
So when that little boy
That's so
froze to
sad.
death, though in Uri, their family couldn't sue.
Not CenterPoint.
Oh my God,
they're
I didn't
immune.
know that. But you know, you're talking about they're going around cutting trees. Do you know that policy is the homeowner is liable for getting the debris up? Did you know that, the tree debris?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was on
Well,
next door.
if it's in there, if it's your property in their right of way, yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
that's your problem.
Yeah.
Because this elderly lady was saying that they had cut them down and they piled them up, and then we had some rain and stuff, so now the branches are kind of like in her driveway, so she came back out. And CenterPoint told her, well, you got to get them up. She's
Well,
85.
Look, you promise when you buy a piece of property and there's a right of way that you're going to keep that right of way clear so they can use that right for utility. And if you let a tree, I was over in my neighborhood, somebody planted a pine tree in the middle of the right of way and it's growing up into the power lines. You know, that's the homeowner's problem. You're supposed to keep the right of way clear. And if you don't do that, then they have the right to come in and do it.
And it's your vegetation that grows up into the lines.
No, but the tree came from the alley. And the tree was in the alley, and they put the stuff up. This wasn't her tree. This was all the debris from the alley. So no, that's
becomes
wrong.
Speaking of, I have a question. When is debris pickup coming around the city? Because there's debris everywhere. I mean, everywhere in my neighborhood. I can't, and even in Herman Park, you walk around with just massive
Even the
piles.
derecho, they were still in Timber Grove. They still had the derecho debris down there. And nobody had come and got it.
Around. A lot has been picked up, but a lot
They're still
out
working
there.
on it pretty hard.
Yeah.
And I got a problem with this word derecho. I think that whether people went to a convention and got drunk and made that word up, that is not a real word.
I know.
No,
I
you know what the
agree.
word is? It's Spanish for straight.
Yeah.
And so it's a straight wind. That's where it comes from. Derecho. Yeah.
I just think it's so sad that CenterPoint does have immunity because then there's nothing there to force them to act right. And they also don't have any competitors. It's just CenterPoint against CenterPoint.
Yeah, I mean, it's the concept of checks and balances. You know, if you've got
But you're
immunity.
better in a monopoly. In a monopoly, there are no checks, there are no balances.
No.
There's only
That's
you.
why
and
you-
And
the
they
state.
line the
should.
pockets.
Hold on.
First
Go
of
ahead,
all,
Bill.
you can't have competing power companies. You don't want two sets of wires running
Right.
every place.
You can't.
So it's got to be a monopoly, and
That's
that's,
what they
why.
said about AT&T.
And that's why it's no. That's not. It's not the same thing. And that's why it's regulated. And the regulation is supposed to be the check on the monopoly. It's just the regulation has not been very effective.
Okay. All right, let's switch back to a $250 million tax load about to be hoisted onto the shoulders of Harris County residents, property owners. Charles, how do you think they're going to try to justify that when you're talking about they've got the 4 votes, and they're going to have a united front? What are they going to say?
I don't think they will, and I don't think they feel the need to justify it.
Exactly.
And
Because they don't have to.
This is the problem, and I should have said this. It's our fault because people did not. I saw on this panel, but just the public. The public does not care enough to force them to justify it. So they're going to pass it, and then people are going to pay it, and they're going to complain, and they're just going to keep moving forward. Just like all these, Barbie Robinson or the Elevate or 800 Middle, all these things happen. People complain for a week, and then we
It's
move
over.
on, and we just forget about it.
They don't move on. They move out. In the last decade, make sure people understand this. This idea that everybody's moving to Harris County is not true. In the last decade, 200,000 more people have moved out of Harris County to someplace else in the United States than from someplace else in the United States into Harris County. It's called domestic migration. The only reason Harris County is growing is because of international migration. And those people are coming here from, all sorts of places. They don't have any idea what the tax rate is. They don't own any property, so they don't know all these issues. But right now, Harris County is bleeding people. Now, a lot of them are moving to Montgomery County and Fort Bend. It's not like they're moving to California or something.
Pretoria.
But Harris County's population has really stalled out. The city of Houston's population is basically the same thing it was a decade ago. People are not getting the fact that people don't have to live here and they can vote with their feet. And a lot of people are starting to do that.
Well, we also talked about the concept of the role of a county government. And during her State of the County address, Lena Hidalgo talked about this whole phalanx of social programs they rolled out and financed with ARPA money and which ones would have the merit to gain additional funding, local funding, our dollars, to continue. And Bill brought this up on a previous show. That's not what counties were organized to do. And they're not taking care of fundamentals. I mean, you have any thoughts? Do we need more social programs in Harris County?
Night court. We need night court. I don't understand why we don't have night court. They have night court in LA, New York, Chicago, Miami. Why we don't have night court? The jail is busting at the seams. Why the jail ain't better? Oh, I know you ain't building no more jails under your watch. You wait till somebody come and knock the hell up out of you. Then you gonna be saying arrest them, arrest them. Look, we need night court. We need better court system. Look at how long it took to rebuild a court. That didn't even make no sense. How long they stayed closed after Harvey. Look, you need better court systems. You need better. You didn't even want to pay the constables. You said they didn't deserve a raise, but you had money for child care. The federal government has given child care, free child care. You go to Texas Workforce for low-income people for years, years. We don't need to duplicate what they already doing. We need to do what we should be doing, and we're not doing it. That's what the county's supposed to be doing.
You know, the health department, under scrutiny now, that was where Uplift Harris was going to come out of, too. Another social program. Chris, chime in here.
So, first, we don't need night court. I'm already working 6-7 days a week.
we
Now
need
you're
night
going to
court.
get my
Yes,
butt out of bed in the middle of the
yes,
night and go
yes,
to court?
yes.
No.
Yes.
Move on to something else. The idea of this tax increase to me is ill-conceived, and you need to. They don't have to sell it because they can do it,
Right.
and I think it's just a bad way to run the county government without. If you're just going to do things without justifying it to the voting public, then eventually you're going to lose all that support, and I don't like the way they're doing it, and I don't know that we need the full 8%. The fact that they said you could do it doesn't mean you have to do
Amen.
it. Okay?
Yeah.
And there may be a better way to approach this than just saying we can get 8%, let's get 8%. I don't know that we need that. And you take 8% and drop it onto somebody's property taxes, that's a big chunk of change every year. The investigations that are going to be coming on top of the investigations that are already there, this is just mounting on top of mounting on top of mounting. And there's some people on Commissioner's Court that ought to stop and consider what's coming their way and to the county. I don't know that the court or the county government is going to look the same in 4 or 5 years that it does right now.
Yeah. Well, Charles, I mean, if you're an outside corporation looking to relocate somewhere in Texas because of favorable tax laws, less regulation, at least on the state side, and you're looking at what's going on inside Greater Harris County, would it give you pause?
It wouldn't give me pause to move to Montgomery County. That's what the answer would be. I'd move to Montgomery County, potentially Brazoria County, maybe Fort Bend County, but maybe not, seeing how things are going there. But it would certainly give me pause to move into Harris County, especially if I'm moving into Houston and Harris County. Then you have there's a lot of issues that you just seemingly cannot get away from. And part of this, I was thinking this before, is that when you look at the makeup of Commissioner's Court, I think part of it is, the tax bracket that they are in is compared to even city council members who make $60,000. Commissioners, I think it's like 180. And then you look at take Lena Hidalgo, for instance, and she's getting married to an attorney. So collectively, they're probably bringing in close to $300,000 a year, which is very different than what some of our city councilors are making, and very different than what the average Harris County, Houston homeowner or taxpayer is making. And they're somewhat shielded from the burden that they're placing on us because they don't feel it that same way. And I think that could be why they keep pushing for things like this, because even when city council was considering the garbage fee and the tax increase and all that, the conversation kept surrounding around how people cannot afford it. And
Yes.
collectively they decided, the mayor and council decided, we're not doing this, we're going to put this aside. But you don't hear that same conversation at Commissioner's Court very often. You hear them talk a lot about lower income folks and poor people, the programs that they're going to use to give them more money or to give them other things, but never about the burden that they're placing on them. And I think it's because they're too shielded from it themselves.
Go ahead.
When you said about them, being shielded from him and not looking at it like, so what, it's 8%. They haven't looked at this year's homeowners insurance because it has skyrocketed. I mean, skyrocketed. So many insurance companies are walking away and not even writing policies no more in Harris County. In addition to that, because of the auto theft, it has went up. So then you're gonna add an 8% increase. You don't want nobody left in Houston. Like Bill said, last person hit the lights. Everybody finna move up out of here the way they trying to run people up out of here. And they don't act like they care. At least when the debate comes up, he's right at council. Those council members are like, hey, I can't afford this. So I know our citizens can't. You don't hear that from any commissioners.
Bill, you know,
April doesn't get to talk in a while at all.
Bill watched that fireside chat with the president of the Greater Houston Partnership, and you can't address a problem, and I think the mayor says, until you recognize it. He talked about 1.2 million people moving here over the last decade, and what Bill has just told me is they didn't move here, they moved to Fort Bend County, Waller County, Montgomery County. I mean,
well, yeah, the Greater Houston Partnership talks about the Houston region as a whole, and all their numbers they talk about, but that ignores the fact that you've got a crumbling core. The statistic I've been talking about lately that nobody believes, the population inside Loop 610 has not increased in 50 years.
Wow.
It's the same today as it was 50 years ago. The population of Cy-Fair School District is 25% higher than the population inside Loop 610. I mean, people have just given up on the central part of Houston. And unfortunately, the media, the newspapers, this is all they report about, what's going on here all the time. And they're completely missing the fact that, the rest of the area has moved on.
Charles, I want to ask you a question. What is a one-bedroom apartment cost in the museum district?
Between the lowest you're probably finding right now, 1,700. I'd say 1,700. I mean, you might be able to find like an owner rental for like 16, but 1,800.
And 2,000 not out of the realm of possibility.
No,
imagine a one-bedroom apartment for $2,000.
But not only that, inside the Loop, you have River Oaks.
Yep.
You have Rice University. You have McGregor Third. Those are all single-family communities. You may have one apartment, like in my neighborhood, we have one apartment complex that's in our civic club. That's it. But in those other areas, they have a bunch of multifamily residents, so they do grow more. But in most of the deed restricted areas inside the Loop, you don't have that kind of growth because it's still those single homes.
So let me just interrupt here. When you see an apartment building going up, do not believe that means growth, because it doesn't. Because for the most part, those apartments are replacing a bunch of single family houses that had 4 or 5 kids in them 20 or 30 years ago, and all those apartments have one person in them.
Right.
I mean, there is not any place inside Loop 610 that is growing right now, not any place in terms of population. Just because you see buildings going up, don't assume that means more people, because it doesn't.
Hey, I wanted to bring something up, and I didn't even, but council's been talking about, for the first time in a long time, a developer, I think on the northeast side, is talking about building a whole swath of homes under from between $150,000 to $200,000. Did you see that on council?
I didn't, but it makes sense. I mean, the comptroller just came out with a report last week talking about how we need about 300,000 homes in Texas because of slow permitting, just a whole host of issues that led up to where we are today. So, I mean, we're definitely short, and so I'm not surprised that developers are trying to come in at that point.
Well, I want to swing back around to a continuing theme we've had, is that like the 800 Middle Street units, when they finally get the final tab, even if it were safe to live in, are going to cost like over $300,000 per unit.
Per unit.
And where Bill has advocated, 70 to 80% of our affordable housing budget should be going to building small, sustainable homes that families can have some equity in.
Correct.
Talk
And
about
grow.
that.
Yeah, one of the problems is the federal law really favors building multifamily.
It does.
And that's just something that needs to be fixed at the federal level. But look, if you want to revive a city, if you want to revive a neighborhood, you go build single family houses that families are going to move into. It makes the community stronger, safer. It improves the public schools. It gives people buy-in. It's the way that all of our parents got into the middle class, was by building a home equity.
That's right.
Yes.
And you see places like CUNY Homes where generation after generation after generation has been trapped in this cycle of poverty because they never build any home equity. And I just think the housing policy is fundamentally counterproductive to what we're trying to accomplish in this country.
April, you and your family live out in Aldine, right?
Pasadena.
Pasadena. I mean, is that a place that would welcome, as opposed to like these 1970s apartments that they patch up and people live in for a decade and a half because they just can't get $30,000, $40,000 for a down payment on something else.
Well, let me tell you what the huge issue is. When you become a part of HUD, right, you are capped to make X amount of money. And if you make any more than that, then they cut you off. And you no longer can receive these subsidies to live in these apartments.
Like Section 8?
Yeah. Right? So you can no longer live there. So there's no incentive for these people to be able to work and grow because they immediately get cut off. But back to that, going back to that and building single family homes not only creates a place where people can build equity, but they can also build families and they can stay. And the statistics don't lie. When you are a homeowner, your kids grow up better. They're less likely to be involved in criminal activity. And my biggest problem with this, though, is with this 8%, you're making the homeownership dream a nightmare and unachievable for low-income families, right? So you're not poor enough for the poor, and you're not rich enough for the rich. So you're stuck right dab in the middle. And Commissioner's Court is not evaluating the people that are going to be harmed by raising these taxes. And it's not going to be Lina Hidalgo and her attorney boyfriend that are really going to be struggling. It's going to be low-income families like my father, who's in his 70s and living on a retirement check, that cannot afford these hikes. Who's going to have to pay for that? Other families, his daughters and his sons, right? We're going to chip in to help my father. But my father could not afford that 8%. And a lot of seniors cannot afford that. Single family homes cannot afford that. Single parents cannot afford that. We just can't afford it.
And I'm glad you brought that up about your dad, because this is one thing I need to make sure Harris County homeowners understand. There's two ways when you get 65. You can either do, you can defer your taxes, or you can do a, what's the other one?
Freeze.
Freeze. But you need to be careful which one you pick, because if you die, your family is going to have that burden on them. So you want to make sure, and you need to call the tax assessor's office and see which one you have on your house, because it makes a hell of a difference if you die. So y'all need to really look in that, and it's up to a house worth over.
Well, it's the freeze.
cap.
Everybody ought to take advantage of the freeze, but the deferral, you're basically putting off the taxes till you die, and you're putting it off at 8% interest.
Right.
So it can be a hell of a
Just freeze them where you are at 65.
And freeze them at 65.
That's fine. Everybody ought to do that.
You should freeze them at 65, and that way, you have to go through that. But what is the cap on the amount? It's no houses over a certain amount. Is it over $1 million now?
No, it's the freeze is for anybody.
Okay.
You're
but I just found that out.
Taxes are.
Please, y'all, make sure y'all take advantage of that, because this is going to be a mess.
But by the way, that's just school taxes. The counties and cities are not frozen. It's just school taxes.
Hey, control room, how much time we have left? 2 minutes. Oh, I want to offer this issue just because it is of great import to my good friend Chris Tridico. One area of policy to separate Kamala Harris and Donald Trump is what some call common sense gun laws. Do you think that will come to the forefront?
I want this one.
Well, we both do. No. I don't think that it matters in this election. It hasn't mattered in any election yet. That what gun laws are in place, and when they passed the first AR-15 ban, the fact that the murder rate went down due to those guns didn't matter one bit. And so I don't think that any Second Amendment issues are going to affect this election.
Go ahead, April.
And as much as I'd like to say that gun laws do work, they don't. Mexico has had a gun ban for decades. There's only one gun store in all of Mexico, and it's inside a military base. It takes years for a normal individual to be able to get a gun, and to transport it, it has to be completely, and you guys look this up later, completely dismantled. However, the cartel and the criminal element still run that damn country. So this is why, as somebody who has family still in Mexico who loses property because the cartel just comes in and takes it because they don't have a means to defend themselves. So law-abiding citizens will always follow the law. Criminal element will never follow the law. So when I look at our neighboring countries and what they've done, it has not worked.
Well, it's the whole concept of mutually assured destruction. It's a flawed, but it's what we've got. We got, 500 million guns in circulation. All right, I think we're about ready to wrap up here, unless you guys want to go a whole nother hour.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful, happy Labor Day.
Have a great week. Hope you'll join us again next week for What's Your Point Overtime.
So do look this up. There's only one gun store in all of Mexico.